An hour and a half. That's how long they made him wait, until the CEO walked in and changed everything. The glass doors of Highland Crest Bank slid open, allowing a rush of cool, conditioned air to spill onto the sidewalk. The sharp scent of fresh brewed coffee mixed with the faint polish of leather furniture, creating an atmosphere of quiet efficiency. Dorian Bennett stepped inside, rolling his shoulders beneath his tailored blazer. He wasn't nervous. He had walked into enough boardrooms, signed enough deals, built enough from the ground up to know he had earned his place in any room. He just needed them to see it. His meeting was set for 11:00 a.m. sharp. No reason to expect anything but professionalism. The bank's lobby was a careful mix of modern luxury and old-world wealth. Mahogany desks, sleek glass partitions, and gold accents that caught the light just enough to remind you that money lived here. It was a place designed to impress. The receptionist, a woman with a neatly pinned bun and an air of disinterest, glanced up as he approached. Her nameplate read Melissa. "Welcome to Highland Crest Bank," she said, her voice clipped and automatic. "Do you have an appointment?" "Dorian Bennett," he said, placing his leather portfolio on the counter. "I have a meeting with Linda Kramer at 11. Melissa tapped at her keyboard, glancing at the screen. "You're on the schedule," she said, her voice still neutral. "You can have a seat. She'll be with you soon." Dorian nodded, stepping back toward the seating area. He chose a chair near the floor-to-ceiling windows, where sunlight slanted across the polished floors in crisp lines. A group of sharply dressed professionals stood near the teller booths, chatting about market shifts and investment opportunities. The kind of casual conversation you heard when people were comfortable, when they belonged. His fingers drummed lightly against his briefcase. 10:57 a.m. He was early. He always was. The minutes ticked by. 11:05, 11:15. At first he let it go. Banks weren't immune to delays. But after 20 minutes he started watching the flow of people more closely. A man in a grey suit, maybe early 30s, checked in with Melissa. Less than 5 minutes later, a young banker appeared and ushered him past the frosted glass doors leading to the executive offices. Then a woman in a cream-coloured blazer arrived. No appointment, from what Dorian could tell. Just a casual, friendly conversation with Melissa before she was also led inside. His name was still uncalled. He checked his watch again. 11:30 a.m. Something was off. Dorian's fingers tapped lightly against his briefcase as he watched people come and go. Some entered with the confidence of knowing they belonged. Easy smiles, familiar nods, handshakes exchanged with the staff. Others, like him, sat patiently, waiting for their turn. The difference? They were being called. He wasn't. He had been here for 35 minutes. His appointment had been scheduled. He had confirmed it twice. And yet, he was still sitting in the same chair while at least 6 other people had walked in after him and disappeared through the frosted glass doors leading to the executive offices. Still, he stayed composed. He had dealt with this kind of thing before. Subtle, unspoken barriers. The kind people could easily deny. "Oh, we didn't mean to keep you waiting." It must have been a scheduling mix-up. "So sorry about that. You know how busy we get." Excuses wrapped in politeness. He stood, keeping his expression neutral, and walked back to the front desk. Melissa glanced up, the same impassive look on her face. "Excuse me," Dorian said, his tone calm but firm. "Has Linda Kramer been made aware that I'm waiting?" Melissa let out a short breath, like she had been interrupted mid-thought. She tapped at the keyboard in front of her, not even making eye contact. "She knows. She's just finishing up with another client." He waited for a follow-up. Some acknowledgement that she would check again, maybe offer an updated time. But she simply went back to typing. "Do you have an estimate on when she'll be available?" he asked, holding back his frustration. Melissa barely glanced at the screen before offering a shrug. "It shouldn't be much longer." Dorian exhaled slowly, steadying himself. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. No urgency. No real effort to check. Just another brushed-off response meant to pacify him. And then, right in front of him, he watched it happen again. A woman in a navy blue dress walked in, her designer handbag swinging at her side. She was mid-conversation on the phone, her voice carrying a light, easy tone. Melissa's posture changed instantly. Her tone softened, her lips curved into something that actually resembled a real smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Lancaster," she said, voice lighter, more polished. The woman gave a polite nod and barely had to pause before a young banker appeared at her side, ushering her toward the back offices. No waiting, no questions, no being told soon. Dorian let out a slow breath. He had been here for almost an hour. She had been here for less than a minute. He turned back to Melissa. "So, do appointments matter here, or is it just first come, first served?" For the first time, she looked a little uncomfortable. "I told you, sir. She'll be with you soon." There it was again. That word. Soon. A delay without a deadline. A promise without commitment. A word that let people pretend they weren't doing what they were actually doing. Dorian glanced back toward the frosted glass doors. It would be easy to let it go, to sit down, wait another 30 minutes and pretend this wasn't happening. But this wasn't just about waiting. It was about something else entirely. Dorian returned to his seat, forcing himself to stay calm. He had faced worse. He had built a company from nothing, dealt with condescending investors, been underestimated in rooms full of men who thought they knew better. But this was different. This wasn't about his business plan or numbers on a spreadsheet. This was about being ignored, about being dismissed as if he weren't even worth an update. He checked his watch. 12:05 p.m. Over an hour. He took a slow breath, looking around the lobby again. No one else was waiting. Every single person who had walked in after him had been attended to, led inside, or at least acknowledged. Except him. Across the room, a young teller was speaking to an older man in khakis and a golf polo. Their conversation was light, easy, casual. Dorian tilted his head, listening. "Yeah, I told her to just walk in," the older man said with a chuckle. "She doesn't even need an appointment. You know how it is." The teller laughed. "Well, for Mrs. Lancaster, we always make exceptions." Dorian's grip tightened around the handle of his briefcase. So that was how it worked. Rules for some. Different rules for others. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the polished floors. This was a test. Would he sit here quietly, accept being pushed aside and wait for permission to be seen? Or would he make it clear that his time was just as valuable as anyone else's? He stood. Not quickly, not aggressively, just decisively. He walked past the front desk, past Melissa's blank expression, and headed straight for the frosted glass doors. "Sir," Melissa started, but he didn't stop. He pushed open the door. Inside, a hallway stretched out in front of him, lined with private offices. Some doors were open, others closed. But one thing was immediately clear. Linda Kramer was not in a meeting. She was sitting at her desk, typing on her laptop, alone. She looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to irritation in an instant. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice clipped. "You should have waited to be called." Dorian met her gaze evenly. "I did wait." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Please take a seat," she finally said. Dorian sat, not because she had allowed him to, but because he chose to. But something told him this conversation wasn't going to go the way she thought it would. Linda's fingers twitched slightly as she adjusted the papers on her desk, her face carefully neutral, but Dorian could see it, the slight tension in her jaw, the flicker of irritation in her eyes. "I apologize for the delay," she said, forcing a smile. "We've been extremely busy today." Busy. Dorian let the word sit there for a moment. He had watched at least 6 people be ushered past him like VIPs, while he sat in that lobby for over an hour and a half. "Were you?" he asked, keeping his tone calm but firm. "Because I counted a few clients who didn't have to wait at all. Some without appointments." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. "I assure you, Mr. Bennett, that wasn't intentional. There must have been a miscommunication." "Right. A miscommunication." Dorian exhaled through his nose, keeping his expression unreadable. "Interesting." Linda cleared her throat, clearly eager to move past the conversation. She flipped open a folder, scanning its contents. "Now let's discuss your loan application," she said, her voice regaining that polished, dismissive edge. "I've had a chance to review it, and while your financials are impressive, we do have strict criteria for approvals. Given the current lending climate, I'm afraid we'll need more assurances before we can proceed." She barely finished her sentence before the door swung open. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The hallway, which had been quiet moments ago, was suddenly filled with the low hum of voices. Not just any voices. These carried weight. 3 men stepped inside, all in tailored suits, their presence unmistakably authoritative. Dorian didn't need to guess who they were. These were the people who actually mattered at this bank. The executives, the decision-makers, the kind of men whose approval meant everything in a place like this. And at the front of them was a familiar face. Richard Langford, CEO of Highland Crest Bank, and a man who very much knew who Dorian was. Richard's sharp eyes swept the room before landing on Dorian, his face lit up with recognition. "Dorian," he said, breaking into a smile, "what the hell are you doing here?" Linda froze. Dorian stood, shaking Richard's hand firmly. "Hey, Richard. Been a while." "It has." Richard clapped him on the shoulder. "You still running Bennett Strategies?" "Still growing it," Dorian replied smoothly. Linda stared between them, her fingers tightening around the folder in front of her. Richard turned, his easy smile fading as he looked at her. "How long has Dorian been waiting?" Silence. Linda opened her mouth, but no words came out. Dorian didn't answer right away. He let it sit, let the weight of it settle over her, over the entire room. "About an hour and a half," he said finally. Richard's face didn't change much, not in any dramatic way, but Dorian saw the way his jaw ticked slightly. "An hour and a half?" Richard repeated, his tone deceptively light. "You had Dorian Bennett waiting for an hour and a half." Linda scrambled for words. "There was a scheduling issue." Richard didn't even look at her. His attention was still on Dorian. "You should have called me directly," he said. "I would have made sure you were taken care of." Dorian offered a small, knowing smile. "Didn't think I needed to." Richard exhaled, shaking his head. He turned to Linda, his smile now completely gone. "Linda," he said, his voice calm but final. "Step outside for a moment." Linda's face was now a shade paler than before, her hands tightening into fists before she unclenched them. "Of course," she said, standing quickly and exiting without another word. The moment the door clicked shut, Richard turned back to Dorian, shaking his head again. "I don't know what happened," he said, "but I guarantee it won't happen again." Dorian didn't say anything right away. He didn't need to, because the damage had already been done. The door clicked shut behind Linda, but the tension in the room lingered. Richard let out a slow breath, shaking his head as he took a seat across from Dorian. The other 2 executives stood nearby, exchanging glances but saying nothing. "This isn't how we do things here," Richard said finally, his tone steady but clipped. Dorian tilted his head slightly. "Seems like it is." Richard let that sit for a second. He didn't argue. He didn't try to make excuses. Because men like him, men who sat at the top, knew when something had gone wrong. And right now, he was calculating exactly how big of a problem this was. Dorian wasn't just some walk-in client. He had built a multi-million-dollar consulting firm from the ground up. His reputation carried weight in business circles. He knew people, people who trusted his word. And now? Now he had a story. Richard sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Tell me what happened. Dorian didn't sugarcoat it. He told him everything, the appointment, the wait, watching others get taken in before him. He told him about Melissa's dismissive attitude, Linda's indifference, the way she tried to brush him off like he was just another name on a list. Richard didn't interrupt. The other two executives listened just as intently. When Dorian finished, the silence stretched for a moment. Then Richard exhaled. I appreciate you telling me, he said, and I'll be honest, I'm pissed. Dorian leaned back slightly. Why? Richard let out a short, humorless chuckle. Because this is the kind of thing that wrecks reputations. We've worked too damn hard to build this institution's credibility, and now I have to clean up a mess I didn't even know existed. He turned to one of the executives. Make sure Linda is off the floor immediately. We'll have a conversation later. The man nodded and stepped out without another word. Richard turned back to Dorian. That loan application you submitted, I assume it was solid? Dorian tapped his briefcase. See for yourself. Richard took the folder and flipped through it. He barely made it through the first few pages before shaking his head. This shouldn't have even been a question. Another glance at one of the remaining executives. Fast track it. I want an approval on my desk by end of the day. Dorian raised an eyebrow. Just like that? Richard met his gaze. You should have had it 2 hours ago. I'm fixing the mistake. Dorian considered that. This wasn't about generosity. It wasn't about making things right. It was about control, about damage, about ensuring that the story stopped here, in this office, before it bled into places Richard didn't want it to reach. And Dorian understood that game better than anyone. Still, he wasn't about to let Richard off that easy. I'll accept the approval, Dorian said, standing. But fixing this for me doesn't fix the real issue. Richard's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered. We'll be having a long conversation about that, he said. Dorian grabbed his briefcase, nodding once before heading toward the door. But before he left, he made sure to meet Melissa's gaze one last time. She didn't look nearly as confident now. The summer heat pressed against Dorian's skin as he stepped outside. The bank's pristine exterior gleamed under the midday sun, but inside, the cracks had already formed. This wasn't just about a loan. It wasn't even just about Linda. It was about something bigger, something that had played out in 1,000 different ways in 1,000 different places. It wasn't always loud. It wasn't always overt. But it was there. The assumption that some people belonged in those offices while others had to wait. The quiet dismissals, the polite rejections, the carefully constructed barriers that could always be explained away. But not today. Today, someone had to face the consequences. And the next time Linda Kramer looked at a name on her appointment list, she'd think twice. Dorian checked his phone. A new email, loan approved. He smirked, tucking it into his pocket as he walked toward his car. Respect isn't given, it's demanded. And today, he got what he came for. If you've ever been in a situation like this, if you've ever been made to feel like your time, your presence, your business wasn't valued, speak up. Don't wait for permission. Take your seat at the table, and if they try to keep you waiting, make sure they remember why that was a mistake.